We're going to start off with answering a few questions that have been submitted. I can't, you tell me.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was stated in the training that all pre-printed forms, except for 2000-22 and 4000-40, were still available for use. I wish to point out that pre-printed 4000-49F general field notes are no longer available. 4000-49 has been removed from IAS and replaced with 7010K. And the general field notes are misidentified in the list in the new GIPH as 4000-49H.
So operator, are we ready?
Okay, I'll connect the lines. You may begin now.
I guess we'll start off with anybody out there in the field. We just had one come in through email on some forms and availability. I think a couple of those forms are known that they were deleted by mistake. So we just will take that email and look back through and see what was mistakenly deleted. Anybody out there in the field have any questions?
Operator, we'll now take some questions.
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your phone and record your name. I do need your name in order to introduce your question. If you choose to withdraw your question, please press *2. Again, to ask a question, please press *1. It will take a few moments for questions to come through. Please stand by.
Okay, I think, did we have one with, from the chat, Kevin?
We do. We actually have a few come in.
Okay.
The first one is, it's, what's the date for the supervisors to close an EO1 event? Which I assume refers back to certification.
Yeah, that has not changed as it has been. I think that's a 10-day for certification.
Okay. There was another question as to, are the counts for diesel surveys going to be automatically compiled by the new summary event sheet?
Is that for
diesel
DP?
surveys?
For diesel.
And I don't know if they're talking about a DPM sample or, you know, your diesel exhaust surveys.
I mean, basically, any survey that gets entered through IAS or that gets entered through an assistant into IMSIS will be counted. If it's not entered in any method into IMSIS, then it won't be counted in that report, and we need to look and see how to do that if we're not currently doing it.
Okay, and the next question was, are diesel exhaust surveys still required to be completed, and if so, how should they be recorded?
I don't think we've changed anything there.
No.
We haven't changed anything in that. The health handbook may address that moving forward, but in this handbook, we didn't change anything in regards to that question.
And I did have one more question, but I'm actually going to respond back to the person who asked me to clarify a couple things in it. Okay. Hard to make heads or tails.
Okay. Operator, were there any other questions on the line?
Yes, we do have one question. Question comes from Helena Field Office. Your line is open.
Hello, this is Chris Finley in headquarters.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, everybody pretty much left here due to the weather and safety issue or dismissal we had, but Greg Meeker and I stuck around, Greg Meeker and me. But there was a section on inspection procedures, the basic violation documentation, that whole section.
Is that the section? Can you give me a page number?
Yeah, page 311. I'm trying to see what that is. Roman numeral 3. Yeah, Roman numeral 3. Under.
It's not 311.
It's on page 311. number 1, basic violation documentation.
Okay,
Now, that's under Chapter 3, inspection procedures.
right?
Okay, I just, when you went over the training, you skipped that part pretty much. I think you said that it was covered under the citation and order writing handbook. Is that correct?
For the most,
That whole section?
for the most part it is, but this is a summary of what we would expect to document citation or an order.
Okay, so it's considered a summary, and it comports with the citation and order writing handbook that's that's published now.
Well, it's a standalone basic violation documentation. There may be more supplemental information provided in the citation order writing handbook, but
Right.
this is the basic documentation for a citation or a order.
Okay, and comports with the citation order writing handbook. Okay, so we consider that as a summarization only, that part.
What you see here in Chapter 3 pertains to note-taking. And what appears in the citation order writing handbook, that's where, it breaks down more or less definitions like gravity, negligence, and the components of a citation. The citation and order writing handbook in and of itself does not address minimum note-taking requirements.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay,
That's what I needed to clarify. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Do we have any other on the line, operator?
As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your phone and record your name.
While we're waiting for that to queue up, is there any other questions in the audience in here that someone wants to ask?
Do have another that just came in, and it's metal, non-metal. It is, I got two of them here.
You can go ahead and.
So, under Chapter 3, Carlos, page 3-4, all of those Air Course, and it gives locations for required Air Course air readings. And, of course, a lot of the metal, non-metal mines and regulations there's no regulation to back up that requirement, so would they then be required? No, if there's no regulation to back up that requirement, it would not. We haven't added anything there. Correct.
Yeah, if it's not applicable, it's not applicable. Any more on the chat?
No.
Any questions in the audience? Operators, are there any more questions on the line?
We do have several questions on the line. The next question comes from Denny. Your line is open.
Carlos, are the reviews still required ERP, vent, and roof?
We eliminated the 2002-04 form as part of a regular inspection. If an operator, or if a office or an inspector feels that they need to conduct that review or make a comment that there's an issue, then they can turn in and fill in that form. It is not required as an EO1 inspection.
ERP plan also?
We didn't change anything on the ERP plan requirements. They probably are still in that checklist.
No, the review.
Well, you're talking about something that's, I think, addressed in the, in another handbook, Denny.
No, because quarterly, we're putting in a ERP plan review. Are we still required to do that?
204s, the quarterly 204s are no longer required by the EO1 inspector.
Right, that's what it said. The 2002-04 for roof and vent is no longer required by an EO1 inspector. They can do them if they need to, but they're not a requirement. Now, as far as the ERP plan review, we're looking at the checklist now to see if they're still in there. I can't recall off the top of my head. It is, everybody in the audience is telling me it's still in here, so it's still required. Yes, it's still required.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
The next question comes from Richard. Your line is open.
Yeah, this is Richard Beckerman, Hibbing, Minnesota field office. The mandatory training is, do we have any idea when the recordings will be available for those that might have missed?
At the top side, probably 2 weeks, hopefully sooner, but at least 2 weeks.
And as a follow-up on that, the original email that came from Timothy Watkins, the last sentence of the first paragraph, it says authorized representatives are being instructed not to begin inspecting under this new handbook until they have received the mandatory training. What does that mean to me and my inspector?
Well, he needs to be trained before he can do the inspections.
He's in the training right now.
Well,
Somebody
I had
have-
one that had a reason not to be here. He had a trip to Hawaii planned months in advance of knowing about this, so he wasn't able to get to this training. So I was just wondering, it says under this new handbook, so I just wonder where I'm at with that.
Well, I mean, he can inspect under the previous if he doesn't feel comfortable using this guidance and this documentation, or if you can't provide him assignments that would be commensurate to what the previous handbook said until he can review this new documentation.
But he can inspect under the previous handbook until he can review it.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be a problem with that. I mean, again, it shouldn't be a long turnaround on this, but, you know, there will be some delay with the cutting and editing of the documentation.
Okay, as soon as it's available, he'll complete it.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and as soon as it's available, we will post that out on the internet and make that available online.
But,
All right.
and to add further to Carlos, just so that everybody understands, particularly for everybody who's on the phone via computer, all of our enforcement people should be, and I'm reiterating what Carlos said, should have the instruction and training in the requirements of the new handbook. And now, what that means is that every individual scenario is not going to be able to be accommodated at this training today. We know that. And you mentioned a person of yours who's going to be on vacation. But any other situations like that, they can handle them via the district managers. We got district managers and ADMs sitting up here at the table. They can handle them on a case-by-case basis. Do you all disagree with me?
That's absolutely right.
Well, you know, if they disagree, they might not say it anyway.
We can't have people sitting 2 weeks not working.
Did that answer your question, Richard?
Very well, thank you, I appreciate it.
All righty. Operators, any other questions?
Yes, the next question comes from Ken. Your line is open.
Yeah, my question is, on the timesheet, it said, if I remember correctly, it said open pit, and there was a place to put time in, and then it said surface areas and a place to put time in. So are we supposed to break out the time that we have actually spent in the pit and or quarry versus the time at the surface mine? Or how are we to do that? Just count everything as surface mine?
Now, I'm going to pull up another example that hopefully will clarify that. Where's that event? Yeah, I'm looking for the dummy one though. These are live. I was in the training, there we
On
go.
the far right there?
Okay, now I should be into the event. Now I'm into it, right?
You're just looking at the summary.
Right, but now I need to go to close and go to home. I'm trying. There we go. See, I'm still in this event.
Now he's saying pick an event.
If you select an event, like the date and then event,
Okay.
so yeah, you can select any, but
Yeah, well, I was trying to find the one where I was in the that I had open that was a blank. But I don't remember what number that was.
Isn't it the one up there on top, 627?
Oh, yeah.
4217?
Yeah. You see it?
Yeah, 627.
4217.
You can
It-
type it,
Well, I was trying, it wouldn't take it, but now it is.
No, it should take.
Yeah, see, now it's just on site.
Okay, now if you see what happened, I didn't go far enough in the example earlier. These are now your available options for entering time. Your travel, your other, your on-site inspection time, your citation order, on-site time, and citation order, off-site time. Those are the only options that you're gonna have moving forward in your weekly activity. Did that answer your question, Ken?
Yeah, I just didn't know where, I mean, I understand this. This is just exactly identical to our old one, but the one that you had up earlier had a,
It was a mistake on my part.
okay, so it's not gonna show that pit and then hours in the pit and hours on the surface.
No, I had the wrong event selected.
Okay. All right, that's the same as the other one, so that's the answer to my question. Thank you.
Sure. Operator, any other questions?
Yes, the next question comes from Scott. Your line is open.
My question's off of page 3-4, item number 3A, on the 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet down. It's requiring an air quantity, direction, and quality in each return split of air that ventilates a working area or section immediately before it enters the main returns. Where do we have return air ventilating a working section at? I'm confused with that statement.
It's the return split of the It probably worded a little bit funny, but it's the return split of air that ventilates a working section. It's not return air ventilating. We might can change the wording on that. Do you guys agree with the
Well, I mean,
scenario?
that's right out of the regulation.
Yeah.
So,
But it's for the returns, it's not, we don't have,
We don't have return air ventilating sections.
Right.
This is just where you take the reading.
that's correct. It's the return of the air that's ventilating the section.
it has ventilated.
Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
The next question comes from Walter Young. Your line is open.
Go ahead, bud.
We got a couple questions, if I may.
Sure.
Couple of them short. The first one we want to ask you, Bailey Prep Plant is always under the same ID as the underground mines. And that prep plant had always been inspected quarterly. And according to page 3-4, it says the surface of the underground will now be inspected under the surface requirements. So does that prep plant only have to be inspected every 6 months now?
No, what we were talking about, that it would be required or inspected under the requirements. The requirements we're talking about is those items, those bulleted items or numbered items, such as 1, working areas, 2, working area and section equipment. It wasn't under the same time frames or anything of that nature. It's only under the same requirements. So we didn't have to list these requirements 3 different times, Bud.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still inspecting surface of underground that's in the same mine ID 4 times a year.
Okay. As far as they mentioned the light meters haven't been calibrated for quite some time, and we don't, they were even collected. Are we going to get light meters in the near future?
We are working on trying to find a new light meter. There's people in headquarters that's working on that, but have not had much success as of yet. Mr. Watkins will answer that a little further.
Yeah, Carlos is exactly right. The light meters that we have or had in some areas are outdated. cannot be calibrated, cannot even be maintained. We are looking at a new photometer. I don't know exactly what the time frame is, or whether we're gonna be able to purchase all of those for everyone or not. We do have some that we are looking at, but we don't have a deadline or a time frame associated yet with obtaining the new equipment. But we'll, like I said, we'll keep you guys updated on the progress that we have towards the light meter, but right now, we're not nowhere near getting new ones yet.
That answer your question there, bud?
Yes, it does.
The next question comes from Fred. Your line is open.
Fred?
Yes, hello, this is Oscar. Quick question on the old procedures book and on this new one. There's no discussion about miscellaneous inspections or other enforcement activities. Do those stay or remain the same as they were before? Because this book just addresses regular inspections.
Yeah, we didn't make any changes to any of the other inspections that are required. That's what we really wanted to focus on, was general inspection procedures. It could be applicable as far as the procedures go to these other events. And as we said, these other events can count towards the regular inspection, but we are not changing the guidelines or specifics at this time on any other event codes. Except for the EO2s, right. And the only thing we're changing there is the time frame and that they can be counted towards a regular inspection of a mine in its entirety.
And that's only on the EO2s, right, for its entirety. But the other ones would be counted as part of the regular inspection.
Yes, they could be counted as part of the regular inspection.
So no need for opening another event for that, correct?
But you still have to if there's a need.
I'm not following you.
Well, sir, because, the older procedures with Handbook stipulated other, obviously, miscellaneous inspections. Here, or just the only one was the spots. And now, okay, so if this is going to be included in a regular inspection, do I open another event? I mean, you would have to if you're going on a complaint or a 103G,
Yes, it would have to be, each event needs to have its own ID or event number.
Yeah, we talked about that at one point in here, that if you had to open like a hazard complaint, you could go ahead and open that up, but if you used part of that information to complete the regular inspection, then you would just document that event number for the regular inspection so that we would know it would be counted as part of the regular inspection. Took me a minute to catch on, but I think I did. Did that answer your question, Oscar?
Yes, I guess it just created a few more, but thank you, sir.
Okay.
One moment. And the next question comes from Leslie. Your line is open.
All right, my question is, under the new handbook on page 2-3, under K, multi-gas detectors, you're supposed to bump test for using these instruments for going underground. Now, in metal, non-metal, traveling through the underground mines, you're going away from your office where you can bump test that. And in the field, you don't have the capability of bump testing them at them mines.
Yes, you do. We're looking at, if everybody's gonna have to get a bump kit. Be a hood, a regulator, and then a bottle of gas, but it'll have to be done every shift. And we're doing that somewhat now, but it doesn't have to be, it can be expired gas as far as the date goes, or we're just waking the sensors up. So we will be required to do that before we go underground with that meter.
Okay, I didn't know of any way of bump testing that here in our district.
Yeah, like I said, we've talked to headquarters, and in the offices, we will be looking at getting bump test devices. But for people that are out on travel, We do need to come up with a bump test kit. I know some offices do that now, especially if you have a large mine that multiple people are traveling to inspect with. You could take one kit, everybody could get together and use that kit to do your bump test before you go out. It's being done in some areas now, but that's something we're gonna have to work towards doing. The manufacturer requires it to be done. We require the operators to do it. We need to do it as well.
Right. I thought that was just a recommendation from the manufacturer to bump test that. It wasn't a requirement, but this book is requiring it now. But several of the inspectors will be dispersed at different locations, hours away. We wouldn't be able to gather together and do that on a daily basis.
Then we would have to definitely set up different gases and kits to be able to do that for people out on travel.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
There are no further questions at this time.
Okay, we've got a couple from the chat line, so go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, is the supervisor certification sheet required in the report?
Well, I'm gonna say off the top of my head no, but we're gonna look at, I'm gonna say off the top of my head no, but we're gonna look at the checklist to make sure. Yeah, that is not required in the EO1 anymore. You'll be doing that certification through MSIS, so we decided there was no need to do it on paper and then turn around and do it through MSIS as well. Yeah, we'll probably address that in the revised supervisor's handbook moving forward.
Okay, we ready for the next one? Okay. On page 3.6, chapter 3, in many metal, non-metal mines are extensive abandoned workings that are not traveled. Do all of these workings need to be traveled during a regular inspection? And the answer is no.
Yeah, we didn't change any of that requirements.
No. Now, if miners are going there, that is somewhere.
They're not abandoned. You know, been going to the exam room training. That was a little, you know.
I do have another.
You didn't repeat my question, asking Ms.
That was covered
Ms.
during
Sylvie
the
wants to
metal.
know if they've gone to the exam room training.
Yeah, that was covered.
Exam
That
rule
was
training.
covered specifically there. Yeah.
That's why I didn't repeat it. I wasn't sure what you were saying.
There was also a question as to whether or not we're allowed to take photographs in explosive magazines, and no, we're not. We have guidance out separate from this handbook on that. And the question did come in as to why did we not standardize mine files for all districts, which I think you covered that pretty well earlier, but every district is gonna have unique needs, but there's gonna be a basic format that we're all gonna follow, but every district's gonna have to use what works for them the best and for their mine types.
Yeah, and their staff different districts are staffed different, there's different plan requirements, there's different requirements depending on the facilities that you have, so we're gonna set out criteria, you're gonna see that here in a couple of weeks, tailor that criteria to how it fits your area.
We gotta be a little flexible.
Yeah, we need some flexibility.
Well,
Go-
and most of us have already, you know, been using some form of an electronic file in some form on a T drive. We've been having something that this here is just giving us something to sort of work off of. And like everyone said, if we don't have flexibility, we're not gonna be able to work out, because there's different needs that my district might need than than Dustin's district, you know, so we've gotta have that.
And I'd only add that, as was said at the beginning, this really goes hand in hand with our decision to do the blurring, to go in and do the blurring. That then you've got to have a certain amount of flexibility built in here. But at the end of the day, as Carlos has said, and Tim, everybody's going to be used, and you're still going to be applying your reasonable judgment with respect to enforcement, and that's what we anticipate. And that's what our instructors are going to be teaching here, and we are confident that you can do that.
maybe for a couple more.
Sure.
The next one was specifically covered. It's been asked twice now, but, and it had to do with the return air, venting a section, so it's just a wording issue. And then we will have to get, we did have a question as to whether electrical installations were to be considered as encountered. And I think that since we said the intent is to cover the entire footprint of the mine, we're obviously going to encounter those things that are permanently installed and in one place. So we're going to come across those during the course of a regular inspection.
And part of that definition of electrical equipment might be a pump that's a portable pump or something of that nature, or a charger or something like that. So that's why we gave that flexibility of as encountered.
Yes. Now, there is it's not so much a question as it does say that the Helena Field Office has some questions. And I don't know if we can ask the Helena Field Office to tone in now, or.
They have to go through star one. You have to go through star one and the operator to answer, to ask questions on the phones.
And that is currently it from the chat line.
Okay.
We do have more questions on the line.
Okay, operator, go ahead.
Next question is from Walter Young. Your line is open.
We got cut off before. I had two more questions if I could.
Oh, that's fine. I'm sorry, bud.
That's okay. In reference to page 4-7, it talked about a
Hey, bud, could you get a little closer to the phone there or something? We're having a hard time hearing you, buddy.
I'm sorry. -7, page 4-7, it's saying about obtaining rock dust samples in entries that are separated by temporary controls. Are we talking about room in there, or are we talking about when mains cut the return down from two entries to one entry when they're driving before they put permanent controls in? What exactly are we talking about there?
That'd be both, Bud. We're talking about rooming, and we're talking about in by the tailpiece as well, where you'd have line curtain installed, say, like on a 3-entry section where you have a belt, an intake and a return. We would expect one sample from each one of those entries in by the tailpiece.
Anything that's isolated by temporary controls isn't considered common then?
Exactly.
Okay. That answers that question. I have one more if I may.
Yes, sir.
In reference to page 3.2.
Hey, Bud, one real quick, before you leave there, I had a question earlier. At the top of page 4.7, where it says when rock dust samples are collected, really that rock dust word just needs to be deleted. We're going to get that changed. It adds a little bit of confusion, but it's when samples are collected, because we're talking about coal mine dust and incombustibility. We're going to delete the words rock dust in that third paragraph under C. But that was caught here in the room, so we will clarify that. I didn't want to cut you off, but while we were on that same page, I wanted to talk about it. So go ahead. Page 3 what?
2.
Okay, on page 3.2, where it says that we should work all shifts or should work all shifts and days, the old handbook only required that to be done on mines on the weekend to produce coal. Is MSHA going to offer any overtime in order to fulfill this requirement for the inspection?
I think the overtime would be discussed on a district by district basis in consultation with headquarters and see. What we're really trying to do is get people to change and alter their schedules to try to cover that as best we can to fit in your personal schedules.
Well, if it fit into somebody's personal schedule, I'd be fine with it, but the contract does say first 40 tour of duty is the basic work week without the requirements for specific days and hours within the administrative work week.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything in here that says it's a mandate. This is something that's suggested. SD, inspector discretion, supervisor discussion. I don't think nobody's going against the current contract to fulfill this requirement.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed to hear. Thank you very much.
The next question comes from Western District Group 1. Your line is open.
Hi, this is Jennifer. My question is
concerning the mine inspection summary report. Under samples analyzed, is that truly samples analyzed or samples submitted that inspection? If it's samples analyzed, where does the date come from? How far back does it go?
Can you give me the page number just so I can look at it?
Actually, I'm looking at the guide that came with it as a supplement to the handbook. So it was what was emailed out yesterday, I think.
It goes back 1 year.
We did touch over it today, I just didn't note it in the report.
Are you on page 2-3, though, talking about the inspection summary report?
She was on the attachment, which is the actual.
Ma'am, the summary report would cover the period of the inspection that you have open. So if you have like a EO1 open for a large coal mine, then that could be 90 days. But if it's a spot inspection type report, then it could be just a few days.
Okay, so it's not actually samples analyzed, it's samples you're submitting during that inspection.
It should be submitted.
Collected.
It should be submitted, samples collected, is what it shows on page 2-3. Let me,
Okay.
You mentioned before the analysis comes later, but.
So the discrepancy might just be with the quick reference guide and not necessarily with the handbook itself.
so you're talking about the guide that was sent out by Abraham yesterday evening?
Correct.
Yes, then there's probably a discrepancy with that guide that we'll need to fix because it is samples that are submitted and collected. It is not analyzed. Our intention is not to wait for samples to be analyzed. It is for what we have collected and submitted.
And I think that
Okay, thank you.
the mock-up sheet you had does say samples analyzed.
Correct.
The next question comes from Helena Field Office. Your line is open.
There's Helena.
Oscar, you back?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, very good. Thank you for taking our call. We have a few questions here, and the first one is it's a simple question, page 1-2, former employer. If there's a mine change or in ownership or anything like that, will that negate that time frame for when an inspector can go on the property?
I think that you would have to look at that as a district and an individual basis and get more specifics than that. I don't know that we could answer that question without more information, Oscar.
It would depend on who stayed.
Yeah, that would be a case by case, and I mean, we get the ethics training. It kind of rolls back into the ethics training that we get. So
I'd refer that back up to headquarters if that was the question that came in there, that, ultimately guidance.
Okay, very well, thank you. And then my next question is on the mine profile reports. A lot of times citations are issued and written, and are they're either vacated or they're modified, or an accident report is made non-chargeable or something like that. Will that be reflected in the mine profile report at some time?
if it's corrected in an IMSIS, then it should be reflected in the mine profile report.
Very good, thank you. And my next question was on the weekly report. We're having a lively discussion here as to what MMU stands for.
It doesn't apply.
Oh, okay. So we can forget that, huh?
It stands for mechanized mining unit, which is a term that's used in coal regulations for coal mines.
Phil, that's what we just went over a little bit ago. It was the question that was asked earlier on site time and other time.
Right. Okay, so we're done there. That's all we need to know there. And then we had one other question in regard 3-1.
Hey, Oscar, hang on a second. Pat wants to talk.
I just want to reiterate something. You know, and we did this to create efficiencies, as we said, and effectiveness and more time on the ground with to be spent doing mine inspections, but to the extent and to put together what we thought was the best handbook to create some simplicities in the system, and to the extent, though, that any part of it is inapplicable to what your situation is, then that doesn't apply. We didn't say NA, not applicable, But for those of you who've been managing and who've been inspecting, you know when you get there, you won't have a MMU, or you won't have and I'm making this up because some metal, non-metal mines do have long walls. I was gonna say long walls. But you will know when something is not applicable to your situation. And if in doubt, then you can handle it like we've said in other situations, just go up the line on a case-by-case basis. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, officer, go ahead with your next one.
Okay, one more, and I'll let,
Last question was on page 3-1, the daily cover sheet. You mentioned that the daily cover sheets will always begin with page 1, and all notes from that day will be subsequent to that.
Well, we kind of said that that was an option. I know the handbook kind of says that the daily cover sheet is page 1, but if your office wants to say daily cover sheet page 1, and the next day the daily cover sheet is page 6 because you did 5 pages the day before, that's kind of up to your area, but we do need a daily cover sheet for each day or an equivalent.
Thank you.
thank you very much. We're done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any chat questions?
There are. The first we've covered once, which was that currently the 4,049 F forms, our general field note forms, aren't available in IAS right now, but I believe the intent is to replace those.
Yeah, we had that discussion with Pier. We just need to follow back up with that.
And touching once again on page, on chapter 3, page 4, where we give the locations of required air readings, and it's a metal, non-metal specific question as to, at non-gassy mines, do they have to take those air readings at those locations? And those locations are spelled out because they're required by regulation. So if the regulation doesn't require a specific quantity of air at those locations, then we don't have to verify it, but there's nothing saying we can't make those verifications.
Any other chat questions?
That is it.
Any more questions on the phone, operator?
There are no questions at this time.
Did we generate any more from the audience?
Yep, they're going over there.
Where, oh,
Somebody give him a microphone.
yeah, hang on a second, we're getting the mic to a guy in the audience.
With the ITS going away and the uniform mine file no longer in existence, where is D-tracking going to be at now? And since we have some things as encountered that we don't have to inspect, how does that affect coal D-tracking when they come off the D sequence?
The D-tracking is going to be done as we did before. It's going to be a manual tracking if necessary. I mean, honestly, I've been in the agency for 2 or 3 days, and I can only recall one time when we ever had to dig that up and deal with that. So if we have to, we should have the notes and the documentation to track that. Hopefully with the improved and the more efficient note-taking procedures we're allowing you to do, that will be much simpler to do. Good question. Anybody else in the room have a question? Well, I'm going to,
Any other questions? You know, I tell people, I give them a second chance. I said, this is your opportunity. You all know who's heard me. Don't be bashful.
yeah, if you've got questions, this is the time to answer them or to ask them, and we'll provide you an answer or get you an answer.
There
So,
is a question on the phone.
all right, going to the phones.
Question comes from Ken. Your line is open.
Okay, Ken.
My question is on page 3-1 where it talks about the daily cover sheet. Where do we get this daily cover sheet from?
It's in IAS.
Under forms? Because I didn't see it.
Let me see if I can pull it up here and,
Okay, thank you.
You have to open a new event, I believe, Carlos.
a new event, or can I go to?
Well, an existing event. You have to go to an event that's open.
I'm trying, it's not responding to my home for some reason. Okay.
Oh, there should be a, down there, Daily Cover. It's yours. There it is, Daily Cover Sheet.
New, you gotta create
New.
at the bottom right. New.
Okay,
And then daily cover.
right there. So it's in IAS. I don't know if you followed that, Ken? Cause I sure didn't.
No, we didn't follow that.
They can also request those
Go-
forms from the academy.
Well,
They can go to notes and then open it up from there.
you can go to notes, you can get the blank forms and the paper forms from the academy if you prefer it that way. You can also, as you recall, Ibrahim sent you guys the user's guide yesterday afternoon, late, for the IAS manual, user's guide, so you can refer to that, and it should walk you through it, just as the lady just did me here, and the gentleman.
Okay, do we do one of these? Say we're on a 3-day inspection. Do we fill one out for each day? Say Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, or is it one for the report?
Each day.
And if there's more than one inspector, does each of the inspectors fill one out each day?
Yes, for their notes, they would.
Thank you.
Or an equivalent. Again, we're not mandating only this daily cover sheet. I think as people work through this and look through the samples, I think you'll find this is a fairly easy and efficient way to do it. It's not what people are comfortable with at this point in time, and we understand that. It's an option. We're just trying to show different options. We'll clean up the dummy event sheet that we generated and send that out as an example later on this week or next week, so that you can have that as a guide if you'd like to see how that works moving forward. As Pat said earlier, the key is to try to make it as efficient as we can and reduce the administrative burden as much as we can. Any other phone questions?
Yes, the next question comes from Chad. Your line is open.
Go ahead, Chad.
Are you there?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. We've got a question on an EO2 event. Can we go out and run respirable dust and noise while we do a spot?
I mean, I guess you could, but I'm not sure why you would, but I guess you could. Well, but it's not for the reason that the mine was selected for a spot. I mean, why was the mine selected for? Now, was it the mine selected for a spot because of respirable dust or noise issues?
No, just on a regular event spot.
Then I would say that that probably wouldn't be the most efficient use of our inspection codes.
Okay, we've got another question.
Okay.
What are your expectations for the mines that we have where we have a number of diesel equipment? We have hundreds in some spots. What are your thoughts on that for as encountered?
I mean, just what it said, as you inspect them, as you encounter them. I mean, there's no requirement to go get a certain percentage, but you know, you're the inspector, use your discretion. If you're finding issues with the trucks, then you might want to inspect more than what you encountered. If you're not having issues with the trucks, when you inspect what you encounter, then you probably don't need to look at more of them. I don't know if that explained it very well, but use your just.
With the paper filter, you said 25%?
That's for a question came from the audience about the paper filter, and I don't know if your question was surface or underground.
Underground.
Underground. Okay. Well, then you'd have to look at the caveat: is there a paper filter after treatment device? If there is, then I think we said 25%.
Yeah, 25% and then 10% on the.
Understood. Anything else? One more.
Okay.
You go out to the mine on a EO2 spot,
since there's no time limit on, or no time requirement on the EO2 spot, and EO1 requirements can be covered under an EO2, do we need to split the time on the timesheet?
There really wouldn't be a need to unless you wanted to. I mean, you could use that spot line on the timesheet to cover everything you did.
Very well. That's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
we got one more from the chat here.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple. It's about how do you code review of the electronic mine file review? How do you code your time? And the example was, would you do it under T18? And that's enforcement time. You know, T-code time is non-enforcement, non-inspection time. But that's part of your inspection and part of your review for that. So it would primarily go under other time on the enforcement.
And an EO1.
Yes.
Under the EO1. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of discussion, a lot of things generated. I encourage you to get together with your employees and co-workers and discuss this and figure out what's gonna be the best method, what's gonna be the best way for your office to handle and deal with some of these types of questions. We try to provide the flexibility with this handbook to let you do that.
I seem to be reiterating today. I want to reiterate what Carlos just said again and what Tim said earlier about the flexibility, because you all know that in some geographical locations now, I rode down here in a hybrid, so I'm going to use that as an analogy. We got kind of hybrid offices now. I mean, we really have enforcement offices. I'm not even supposed to be, I hope Mrs. Ataslo is not listening. I'm not supposed to be saying a coal office or a metal office. It's enforcement now. But we've got coal and metal together. So that's all the more reason to get together and talk amongst ourselves and decide what's more productive, what's more meaningful, what's more reasonable, what's more useful, what makes the most sense. And then after you do all those, put all those kind of analyses together, you still might come up with a few unique kind of situations and unique questions that still might remain open that you want to come forward and ask us. And then all of us will be up to and including Tim, me, Mrs. Ataslo, all of us. The people who've given you the training here today, Carlos and his team, will be PK will be available for you to send any residual, I hate to use the word residual, but remaining questions to us. And that's how I think what I'd like to say.
Yeah, I was gonna reiterate what Pat said, that we still have, and you got the email, there's an email address for questions, GIPH questions, what is it?
GIPH.questions@dol.gov.
Yeah, GIPH questions@dol.gov. We're gonna keep that email open for a year. So if you've got questions that come up afterwards that you all can't discuss in your groups or your offices or whatever and come to a resolution, then send the questions in. Everybody on this table gets to look at those questions. We're all on the email group. We'll formulate some type of an answer and figure out how to get that information back out if it's something that's unique or different or something that we missed in the training. And I kind of, just because Pat wanted me to reiterate one other thing, you know, we talked in the very beginning, but I just want to kind of close the loop on this a little bit, the should versus the shall. Another reason that we decided to try to stay away from that and try to encourage inspector discretion, supervisor discussion, and working together is, in the past, every time we've put a shall, we've had an inspection review come in after an accident or whatever else, or an audit, and we actually set you all up a little bit to fail, because there was so much in there that you couldn't dot every I and cross every T. So that's another reason we tried to stay away from that should and shall language as much as we could and left that up to supervisor discretion, inspector discussion. And you guys need to come to a common agreement on what the various items in here mean, what a various regulation means, how it applies to the various facilities that you're inspecting, the various mines you're inspecting. That's why we couldn't do a uniform mine file and say this is the way everybody's got to do it, because there's things that aren't applicable to all areas. So there's no reason to hamstring an area to do something that's not applicable. And that's the way we wrote this handbook.
And you know, I'm gonna follow up what Carlos said. I've been in IMSA a long time too, and I hate to bring up something. In a way, I want to bring it up as a teachable moment. The last big, unfortunately, disaster we had, which was UBB. And to be honest with you all, and I'll say this, having been I was not a part of enforcement when UBB occurred, but it later came under my jurisdiction. And in my humble opinion, with all due respect, and it may be somebody in this room who was on the internal review report, but I would say it anyway. In all due respect, that was one of the, I don't want to say worst, one of the harshest internal review reports that I have ever seen in MSHA on our own people. Because first of all, I think that when you have a bad accident, what do people do? They look to blame somebody. And so there we got two parties here. You got the operator and you got MSHA. And you got people looking at MSHA, and so what did MSHA do? What was MSHA's role? Well, what happens is you look back and you look at all these policies and procedures, and you look at all these handbooks, and everywhere it says shall, the inspector shall. And some of the shalls were had nothing to do with the accident. Nothing at all. But it was mentioned in the internal review, you know, the inspector missed this, the inspector missed that, the inspector missed this. And so that's one example. The other example is the IG comes in. And every time we say shall on ourselves, if you miss that one time, it could be one time out of 100, the IG writes you up for a finding. And I'm not being critical of the IG either, okay? Because there is a role for the IG. Let me not say that. I'm making a different point. As well as the IG has done audits of us on assessments. They've done audits of us on tech support, like the turnaround time for sampling. And if we say we have a goal of 75%, and we make a goal, to do a turnaround time, a goal to do the turnaround time in 10 days. And let's say we did one in 15 days. We said we had a goal of 10 days. We didn't say that was mandated that we do 10 days. Well, we got a finding from the IG. You said you had a goal. Well, I said back to them, goal means goal. It doesn't mean mandated, and they don't back off. And so what do? You get another finding. So I say, I've been saying this though for a long time, since I've been in MSHA. Be careful about putting regulations on ourselves. I mean, I want you to fully understand. That doesn't mean, like Carlos said, working together with your management, you decide that something must be done. But you don't have to write it down that it shall be done, so that somebody's going to say to you that it shall be done in every instance. I think this is making it better for our own people in a number of ways. And in the final analysis, in the way you can see, I feel kind of passionately about this, because I have been the one to have to respond to so many IG reports. You all kind of don't see them where we see them, and we have to respond to them. But I do believe that this is adding a degree of flexibility, a degree of reasonableness, and the bottom line is still that we can be in a process that we provide better safety and health protection for our miners.
Thanks, Pat. Any other questions on the phone? Operator?
The next question comes from Jim. Your line is open.
Yeah, while conducting an EO1, just curiosity here under the new guideline procedures, are we required or not to inspect all equipment? If not, how do you, when completing the inspection, sign off saying that you're done, that you did an inspection, you completed it in full?
Well, what we're talking about is, as Pat just said, the goal is to inspect all section and working area equipment and all out-by equipment as encountered. To say that a mine has been inspected and completed in its entirety, we're talking about the footprint of that mine or facility. We're not talking about the contents of that mine or facility.
Okay, now I'm making this I should have clarified in reference to like a surface operation.
And it's the same definition applies, Jim. You don't have to go and find every piece of equipment on that surface to say that it's completed its entirety. If you've inspected all physical bonded property where miners work on that surface mine, and you inspect everything that you encounter, and you inspect all the pit equipment or the production equipment as you inspected that pit, then you've inspected that mine. Okay.
I've got an example. What we're saying is if you go out and you go and look at a warehouse, the mine has 15, tow motors that are working. You go through that warehouse and you inspect the warehouse and you encounter 5 of them. That's all you're going to go get. If you encountered 5 of them, you're not going to go off and look for the other 10 if that's where they were located. Unless there's an issue that you come up with those and you feel that the need to go and get all of them. But you would have completed the entire inspection by going through it and actually inspecting that warehouse. Does that make any more sense?
Not really, but
good try, though. I liked your example myself.
That might be a question you need to talk to your ADM or DM.
Or your supervisor.
Gotcha.
Are there any more questions on the phone?
There are no questions at this time. For those on the phone, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name.
While we're doing that, I'm going to kind of ask the guys up here on the table to give you guys a quick opinion, thought, overview of the process, the procedures that we've been following for the last several months. I'm going to start with Dustin Corelli, and he can introduce the next person. I guess congratulations to Dustin. He was just named the district manager out in Rocky Mountain. So
Thank you.
Congratulations to Dustin.
Thank you. It's been interesting on this handbook.